to Washington, every supporter could see what was coming next. It's what the chairman says just before they sack the manager. Peter Mandelson is no longer our man in Washington. He's furious. Has the Prime Minister made an enemy of the Prince of Darkness? The President arrives on Tuesday for his second state visit. Maybe he'll give the Prime Minister some advice from his TV show, The Apprentice. How best to say, you're fired. Westminster's transfixed by the Mandelson affair, but it'll be hard to ignore 150,000 people who say, never mind all that, stop the boats. We'll speak to the new Business Secretary, Peter Kyle, the Shadow Education Secretary, Laura Trott. With a vacancy at our embassy in Washington, we'll speak to the man who left the post as our ambassador to the United States the last time Donald Trump was president, Lord Kim Darroch. Donald Trump says he'll put tariffs on those who trade with Russia, but only if other NATO countries do the same. Sarah Brown is just back from meeting President Zelensky in Kyiv. We'll speak to her live. Plus, with us throughout the show, editor of The Spectator, Michael Gove, former head of Channel 4 News, Dorothy Byrne, and journalist and author Donald McIntyre. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. It's quite possible that the person most taken aback by the huge turnout at yesterday's Unite the Kingdom demonstration was its organiser, the hard-right activist known as Tommy Robinson. 150,000 people crammed into central London, most carrying national flags, the Union Jack, the Cross of St George, even the Scottish saltire, protesting about immigration, about free speech, and about the decline of Christianity. There was some fearsome rhetoric, including from Elon Musk, who called for the overthrow of the British government. At the margins, there was some hooliganism. But I think that for those who oppose Robinson and his ilk, the most alarming aspect of the event was just how normal the vast majority of the marchers were. I spent an hour or two amongst them, and my own impression was that they were mostly the sort of people you'd meet in a country pub or in half-time queue for the loo at football or at a concert. There was a sprinkling of black and brown faces, and the event was brought to a close by a gospel group singing Jerusalem. All that must worry the traditional mass parties, Labour and Conservatives, now polling at less than 40% between them. They're draining support to parties like Reform and the Greens. And yet, a man recently out of jail, condemned as an extremist thug by most mainstream media outlets, can rally a demo the size of the entire population of Cambridge or Blackpool. A feat you couldn't imagine either Sir Keir Starmer or Kemi Badenoch pulling off anytime soon. Perhaps the people are sending us all a message. Let's see if anyone at Westminster's listening. It's been another truly awful week for the government, with growing concerns over the Prime Minister's judgment around the appointment and sacking of Peter Mandelson. A little earlier, I spoke to the new Business Secretary, Peter Kyle. Peter Kyle, there were 150,000 people on a demonstration in London yesterday, organised by Tommy Robinson, who's just recently left jail. Does that disturb you?
It doesn't disturb me because it's actually proof that we live in a country where free speech, free association is alive and well. The bit that disturbs me is that when a minority go to an extreme and end up perpetrating violence against the police, that is unacceptable, and those people should and will pay a price for it.
I think everybody will agree with that, but I think the striking thing was simply the size of this. I mean, it surprised the organisers, I imagine, certainly surprised the police. But does it give you pause for thought that a demonstration... The planks were essentially anti-migration, concerns actually about free speech, and I spoke to several people on demo who talked about that. And, by the way, the decline of Christian religion. Does that not send you a signal that maybe something needs to be addressed?
Well, I'd say 110,000 people or 100,000 people there with lots of different reasons. The flag was waved a lot. I do want to make the point that flag belongs to all of us. And that flag means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but it is about essential British and, yes, in this case, English values and principles. Those English values and principles include free speech, freedom of association and the like. And all of those things are demonstrated just by the fact that that protest went along and that demonstration went along completely freely, shows that those values are actually alive and well.
OK. One of the issues on the march was the issue of migration. There are some suggestions in the papers this morning that the government will start flights to France on the one-in, one-out policy this week. What do we know about that?
Well, what we know about that is that we are straining at the bit to get a grip on the migration crisis that we inherited from the Conservatives, where their free entry into the UK experiment left us with a disastrous inheritance. So we've been straining at the bit. We've been doing everything we can. The lesson is that by cooperating with our partners, France, rather than rowing with them, we are able to deliver. So I hope the flights will start as quickly as possible. I don't know the exact date they will, but people need to look at this and see that we are straining at the bit. Okay. We are also angry about what we have inherited, and we are doing everything possible to get a grip on it. All
right, let's talk about the news of the week. Is it correct that Peter Mandelson was appointed, his appointment was announced before the security checks had been completed?
No. The Cabinet Office did an independent inquiry into the appointment, as they do in every public appointment of this nature, and the information that was presented to the Prime Minister. The second process was obviously a political process, where there are political conversations done in Number 10 about all the other aspects of an appointment of this nature. Now, both of these things turned up information that was already public, and a decision was made that, based on Peter's singular talents in this area, that the risk of appointing, knowing what was already public, was worth the risk. Now, of course, we have seen the emails which were not published at the time, were not public and not even known about, and that has changed the situation.
Turned out not to be worth the risk, didn't it?
Well, look at what we've achieved in that time. We were the first country to deliver a trade deal and a tariff deal with Trump. Trump says publicly that it is the best deal that has been done. Then you look at the state visit and you look at everything we're about to announce. I'm announcing today that American banks are investing an additional £1.2 billion in Britain. They are creating 1,000 jobs in Belfast, hundreds of jobs in Edinburgh and Manchester. All of this has come from the steadfast negotiation which has been done by a singular talent with a Prime Minister that is there leading from the front.
I want to come back to talk about the issue of investment, but let's just clear away what has actually happened this week, because there's some murk here. First of all, did the Prime Minister actually talk to Peter Mandelson before he sacked him?
I don't know the details of this. I was in China doing trade talks, and before that I was in Washington preparing for this trip, so I'm not all over who said what and when. But, Trevor, can I just say...
Hang on. Before we go on to anything else, most viewers will be a bit puzzled. You're out on the round this morning speaking for the government. They didn't tell you whether the Prime Minister spoke to the UK's ambassador before he sacked him.
Trevor, the emails spoke for themselves.
No, I'm just talking about the way the Prime Minister conducted this sacking. Did he or did he not speak to Peter Mandelson before he sacked him?
I think when you look at the issues at hand here, and let me just pause for
a second. Well, you don't know, then.
Let me just pause for a second. We are, and bear in mind that there are victims of what Jeffrey... It's important.
I know you want to take me away to somewhere else, but this is actually about the way the Prime Minister does his business. If somebody was sacking you, would you expect them to speak to you or not? So I'm asking, did the Prime Minister speak to Peter Mandelson before he sacked him?
Trevor, I've never been sacked before. And I know other people who have been sacked in various different jobs who haven't had the person at the top of the organisation do the sacking themselves.
So you didn't talk to him?
Trevor, I have asked lots of questions about this before I come and did this round. One of the things I didn't ask was whether the Prime Minister made the call himself. I think when you see the issues at stake, when you see that at the heart of this are victims of a paedophile that was convicted, then I think the most strident issues that I should be caring about is what were the circumstances, what is new, what drove this to happen, not actually who made the phone calls to actually deliver the news to who? The key thing is that the Prime Minister, within hours of actually seeing the new evidence, the new information, he took decisive action.
Let's talk about this, whether this new information. Prime Minister said the proper process of vetting had been followed. Are we expected to believe that none of this information was revealed? I've been vetted, you've been vetted, and I've been vetted for things which are nowhere near as significant as this job. And I doubt that had I had this kind of correspondence, it wouldn't have been revealed. So we're expected to believe that nobody knew about this relationship or the depth of this relationship?
We knew that it was a strong relationship. We knew all of the public information. But Peter Mandelson has done...
Yeah, the vetting is meant to go behind the public information, isn't it? Or doesn't it?
Well, no, it goes to everything that is within reach. And the information that has come to light was not in reach. The Prime Minister, as soon as the new information came... Look, the heart of the issue, and I understand what it is that he had a relationship with Epstein that was known about publicly. And was that enough to actually prevent him from having the job in the first place? When you are dealing with the matters between two governments and you are trying to get a talent which is singular to put to the bear on behalf of our country, which has been proven to be delivering for our country, these are decisions that the Prime Minister made. We knew that there were risks involved, but also his talent led us to believe at the time that the risk was worth it.
I know you want to take me off onto the more general issues.
I'm not trying to take you off...
But there's a very specific... In this particular case, the timeline of events and who did what when really matters. The Prime Minister strenuously and vociferously defended the ambassador to the United States on Wednesday. But we know now that these emails, the text of them, was available on Tuesday. Now, I know you'll tell me the Prime Minister didn't read it till Wednesday, Wednesday night. But something is wrong here. Either the Prime Minister just didn't he didn't know, but somebody should have told him before he stood up before the House of Commons, or maybe he did know. Which is true?
The emails in full were not released until Wednesday evening.
No, we know they were in Number 10 on Tuesday. Number 10 said this.
Number 10 had what was publicly available on Tuesday, which was extracts of emails, which were not in context, and they weren't the full emails.
No, they had the Bloomberg emails on Tuesday.
No, Trevor, they had what was public, which was extracts of emails. And if you just let me just finish the sequence here. And immediately upon being alerted to extracts of emails, the Foreign Office contacted Peter Mandelson and asked for his account of the emails and asked for them to be put into context and for his response. That response did not come before PMQs, and then after PMQs, the full emails were released by Bloomberg in the evening. By the first thing the next morning, when the Prime Minister had time to read the emails in full, having had them in full, and reading them almost immediately of having them, Peter was withdrawn as ambassador.
Is your point here that Peter Mandelson essentially lied, or I think the expression now was economical with the truth?
I can't say what happened, but for whatever reason, the full content of the emails and the existence of those specific emails was not known. But let me just make this very clear.
Can I ask one other question?
We're talking less than 24 hours from seeing the full emails and Peter being withdrawn from Washington. This was decisive. The Prime Minister has always put the national interest first. He has done what is right for the country to deliver for the country. And as soon as the emails became public, he withdrew Peter Mandelson.
One thing that puzzles me, though, is that the Prime Minister, we now know this is true because that Number 10 said this, Prime Minister interrogated Lord Mandelson about the relationship with Epstein himself. This is one of the country's leading barristers. If he couldn't actually have got the information from Peter Mandelson before the appointment, who could? I mean, who failed here? Who failed here? Somebody must have failed.
Well, look, it comes back to this central point. There was a lot of information publicly. We knew that there was a relationship. We knew the relationship continued after he had been convicted. The decision was taken in the national interest to try and use the specific talents that he had, which were singular and outstanding. Now, all of the media, Trevor, had also the same information that we had at the time. You made
all of the media
Trevor,
does not have the responsibility for appointment.
Well, the media has the responsibility for interrogating and also doing what it does, which is holding government to account. And lots of comments, including from you, were celebrating his appointment as ambassador.
Yeah, but nobody has put me in charge of making the appointment. I think I want to stick with who,
I know what you want to stick. I know
which
what
is
you
the
want to
Prime Minister.
With Trevor. But the fact is,
and by the way,
public knew. The media knew all of this, the relationship. We only knew what the media knew at that time. We only knew because you didn't.
What's the point of the heavy vetting if all that you know is what I know? I mean, what's the point of having MI6? What's the point of having all of these civil servants if what you end up doing is saying, actually, we don't know anything more than you do? Or did they know and just ignore it?
No, there was no question that the contents of these specific emails weren't known about or made public or were used in either of the inquiries or the investigations before the appointment process.
All right. Look, Peter Mandelson's not going to be in high office again. We all know that. But the Prime Minister who sanctioned the appointment is still there. You must see that this raises some wider questions, which are about the Prime Minister's judgment. He backed and sacked Louise Haigh. He backed and sacked Rushanara Ali and Tulip Siddiq, or they stood down. He backed and sacked Angela Rayner, and now Peter Mandelson. How many cases is it going to take before at least somebody asks the question, is there something wrong, either about the Prime Minister's judgment or the machine he has around him?
When you've got a government which has over 120 ministers in it, you are going to have people that come and go from time to time, and you are going to have people who don't live up to the standards that we expect. Now, let me make this point. Keir Starmer raised the bar for standards in public life. He gave more powers for the Commissioner for Public Standards so that he can have independent inquiries and that he can do inquiries swifter. Okay. So I make this point to you, whereas when Priti Patel was investigated,
well,
it took.
Yes, let's get to that. Let's get to that point.
Well, let me finish the point because we don't know what point.
No, I don't want to finish that point because what you want to because I think when Priti Patel and when Boris Johnson did what you were absolutely unsparing. You didn't come on and say, oh well, you know, there are 120 ministers, there's going to be problems. You attacked them on every single one.
And you're making my point for me, Trevor.
Which is what?
Well, give me 10 seconds and I'll tell you. You're making the point for me because I called for it, but it took 2 months. The Commissioner said that she had fallen foul of the standards of public life, even though they were lower than they are today, and he didn't sack her. In fact, it was the Commissioner that went, not the Minister. With Keir Starmer, what he does do is take time to get to the bottom of the facts. He allows the Commissioner to do his work, and every single time he has acted decisively when the facts have come to light and the Commissioner has spoken. In this case, even though this is a really difficult issue, it involves crimes that have victims that we should always bear in mind at moments like this. Within hours of having the facts, Keir made a decision. We are basing it on a leader that has raised the standards, given more power to the Commissioner, and then that means it's harder for people to meet these standards from time to time. He acts decisively.
We could talk about this forever, but I just wanted to spare a few minutes at the end of this interview to talk about your actual job. But just before we get onto that, one more bit of politics. You've got Labour's about to get a new deputy. It'll either be Bridget Phillipson or Lucy Powell. Who are you backing?
Do you know, I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to say publicly, but
you're a parliamentarian.
But I have a lot of respect for my cabinet colleagues, and I think those who are in cabinet are doing a fantastic job at the moment, and would make and if anyone were in there, they would make a brilliant deputy.
All right. Well, by the way, one of Lucy Powell's prominent backers is Andy Burnham. Talk of him coming back to Commons. Would you like to see that?
Andy's a real talent. I think he's doing an incredible job in Manchester at the moment, and I think Manchester really needs him. I love working with him in Manchester. It'd be a shame for Manchester to lose him. Am I allowed to talk about my job now for a moment?
Yeah. I quite like the formulation there. It's great for Andy Burnham to stay in Manchester.
Well, he hasn't said he wants to come to the Commons. He's a great talent, and I love working with him.
Let us talk about your job. You're going to there will be trade talks this week with the President when he comes here. The President wants us and EU countries to ramp up sanctions against Russia and secondary sanctions against countries that continue to trade with Russia, including China and India. Are we ready for that?
We're having those conversations. I mean, I was in Washington on Sunday and Monday, less than a day and a half after being appointed to the job of business and trade. We are having very detailed conversations on a whole range of issues, the fruits of which are partly going to be announced in the coming weeks. So I'm already announcing that American banks are investing an additional £1.2 billion into Britain. That means 1,000 jobs in Belfast, hundreds of jobs in Edinburgh and Manchester. These are new deals. This is banks like Citibank. These are Standard & Poor investing a lot of money for the very first time in parts of our country. It's not just London. We're making sure through these negotiations it benefits the whole of the UK. So the relationship we have with America is actually benefiting workers right around the country. Compare that to Nigel Farage, who goes to America and calls for them to punish Britain. Just look at the difference in leadership and what it can deliver for our country. This is the start of a great week for us.
I want to be fair to let you make that point, but the question I actually asked you was, are we open to putting extra tariffs on, for example, China and India, as the President has requested to support Ukraine?
We are open to those conversations, and we're looking at ways that we can support Ukraine very creatively, very assertively, and very imaginatively in this time, and that means working with America. We have suggestions, America has suggestions, and I can tell you, having been there this week myself, in the White House, in the West Wing, they are very constructive conversations. We have a good partner in America, and it is strengthening, not weakening.
So we're clear that we're open to that. Can I ask about another thing, part of your job? One of the key pillars of your industrial policy is life sciences. Two of the biggest firms in that sector, AstraZeneca and Merck, have dropped billion-dollar plans to invest here. Alongside that, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the boss of INEOS, the energy company, has announced that INEOS won't be investing in the United Kingdom. First of all, how serious a blow is that to industrial strategy? And is there anything that you think you can do to persuade them to change their minds?
When you say the word serious, these are serious people with serious businesses. Now, one of those businesses hasn't dropped it. They've actually paused for a moment because they want more discussions with government, and we are intensively engaging in those discussions. Secondly, there is another side to this coin. You have BioNTech, a German pharma company, who has just invested, because I signed the deal with them, £1 billion for the very first time in Britain. They did so saying that they like the direction of travel with our regulatory reform, with the other reforms we're doing to the economy, and they believe that's going to create a great environment for investment. So it's not just a one-way street here. But I am acknowledging, Trevor, that this is a tough time for the pharmaceutical industry, both domestically and globally. There are a lot of challenging, competing forces at work.
Britain... They're not quite right. They haven't said they're not investing. They said they're not investing here. And that's to do with their confidence, or lack of it, in our government, isn't it?
It's to do with a lot of competing forces, including, you see, America being very assertive about onshoring manufacturing of certain products that includes pharmaceuticals. Now, these are things that we are intensively negotiating about. We are the best place to do R&D. We're the best place to manufacture these high-precision pharma products. And we're in negotiations. We have other companies that are investing more. There's a lot, I think, we'll be announcing in the near future, I hope, because we are in such intense negotiations. It's an important sector. We want to keep that sector here. We understand that there are stresses and strains, and we're working to overcome them.
Peter Carr, thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks, Trevor.
Well, let's see what our panel made of all that. We're joined all morning by the editor of The Spectator, Michael Gove, the former head of Channel 4 News, Dorothy Byrne, and journalist and author Donald McIntyre. Dorothy, the Mandelson affair. Peter Mandelson carries clouds of drama with him everywhere. What do you think fallout's going to be?
Well, this really does call Starmer's leadership into question. He said there, Peter Kyle, that they knew that Mandelson had a strong relationship with Epstein. And at the time he was employed, those of us who knew a lot about Epstein, I've made several programmes about Maxwell and Epstein, were astonished that anybody who was a friend of Epstein should have been appointed to that position. We have to remember that it was known that he continued to know Epstein after he had been convicted for trafficking a child for prostitution, Why on earth would you give that job to somebody? Of course, it now comes out that he actually stayed in his house while Epstein was in prison. So I think the very fact that he appointed him in the first place should have been examined more then, and now we know that it was known in Downing Street and among civil servants that there was more information at the time that the Prime Minister stood by him, which seems extraordinary.
Michael, you will have been through this kind of process many times. Peter Kyle said that it was worth the risk, given Peter Mandelson's manifest talents. Didn't pay off, did it?
No. So to be fair to Keir Starmer and to the politicians making these decisions, the vetting process is not as rigorous as perhaps it should be. I remember when I was appointed Environment Secretary, after I was given the job, I was then asked by the ethics team, by the way, Michael, are you a vegetarian? It was considered to be the most significant question after I was appointed, when I was supposed to be interacting with the nation's farmers as to whether or not I actually ate meat. For the avoidance of doubt, I do. But more broadly, I think the reason why this story is consuming such interest is not just because of the magnetic nature, some might argue radioactive nature, of Peter Mandelson's personality. It's because there's so little else to say positive about the government. So personality questions fill the vacuum where a strong narrative or sense of purpose should be.
I want to come back to that point because, of course, it bears on what we saw in the streets of London yesterday. But that's, for the moment, sticking with the Mandelson affair, as it will no doubt become known. Don, when your biography of Peter Mandelson appeared before, I think, any of this happened.
Long before. But when you say before any of it happened, long before the Epstein affair, long before the embassy in Washington reared its head for his career, I think actually it is a little bit similar to his first resignation in respect of the fact that he had kept secret his loan from Jeffrey Robinson. In that incident here, he obviously didn't tell the whole truth, if indeed he was asked for the whole truth. I mean, he did the opposite of what Michael's colleague Alan Clark once did when asked by, I think, the Kensington and Chelsea constituency whether he had any skeletons in his cupboard, and said, graveyards full of them. But on the other hand, I also agree with Dorothy that the essential facts about the Epstein relationship, and indeed, by the way, his sort of business background as chairman of a consultancy and so on, were all known. There had been a J.P. Morgan report saying, I think even saying, that he had stayed in Epstein's house after the 2008 conviction. So I think it does. I mean, I think that, of course, Michael's right that, you know, we're talking about a radioactive personality rather than sort of big issue politics. But the truth is, it does say quite a lot about the system of government. And I think the political judgment involved was probably the wrong one.
I think, Michael, the issue that's going to come out of all of this, I mean, the soap opera element of it will no doubt roll on. But the big question will be about the Prime Minister's judgment and the system that supports his judgment. You know, should he have known? And should somebody have called his attention to these things before he stood up and so on?
Yes, and I think that the Prime Minister has shown a pattern, I think, of consistently poor political judgment on a number of areas. I don't doubt for a moment that, in personal terms, Keir Starmer is a decent and moral person, but he's adrift as Prime Minister, and he relies increasingly on others to exercise political judgment on his behalf, and he doesn't give a clear enough steer to those who work for him about what he truly believes. In the past, when he's given a speech and that speech has attracted controversy on migration, as it happens, he subsequently disowned...
The stranger's speech.
Precisely so. He subsequently disowned the words that came out of his own mouth. In that speech, he'd said, some people might think, these comments are political or motivated by a desire for political advantage. Not at all. They're what I believe. Then a few weeks later, he reveals that actually he didn't even know what he was saying. So there is a disjuncture between the Keir Starmer of the past, when he was Director of Public Prosecutions and a human rights barrister, who was a sincere, soft-left activist, and the Prime Minister now, who is, I fear, a vacuum, and who has been compared by his own aides as to the driver of a Docklands light railway train. As we all know, with DLR trains, the driver is simply a useless lump because the direction is set by others.
Well, they have no drivers, I think, is really the point. But I'd never thought, if you'd asked me a year ago, I wouldn't have thought that there's any chance of my saying what I'm about to say next, Dorothy. Do you think the people are asking the question, will he last until the next election? What do you reckon?
Well, I agree with you that a year ago I would never have thought that we'd be discussing that. But what people feel is that there is a lack of political nous here, that this is somebody with a very lawyerly approach, which is simply not working as Prime Minister. But I also have to say that if people had thought about the women who had been maltreated about Epstein, if they had really thought and cared about women, they would have said that somebody who was a strong friend, no, he agrees, they knew he was a strong friend of a man like that, they would have said he cannot possibly rise to the office of ambassador to the US.
Don, I want to talk about the political fallout here. It is reported that Peter Mandelson's obviously pretty furious about the way he's been treated, feels it's unjust and so on. Prime Minister's probably created an enemy here. Do we get a sense, so you were talking about the pattern of behaviour, that actually what's happening is government racking up enemies?
Well, I think it's probably, I mean, I think he's, inevitably, if you start sacking people with a certain amount of sort of political oomph, of which, for example, Angela Rayner certainly has, then you do stack up enemies. I'm less sure. I'm sure Peter Mandelson will fight over this. I'm sure he will feel aggrieved and that he was badly treated, and he will try and hit back. I think there is a slight question over whether in that particular argument he's going to come off best. I mean, whether he has quite the radioactivity and potency that he once did. On the other hand, I think on the one hand you're right that Starmer is stacking up some enemies. On the other hand, I sort of they're not the right enemies. I mean, there's no real sense of where, part of there not being a sense of where Starmer's going is who he's really against. And I think we'd like to see a bit more of that.
Well, I want to come back to one of them. But Michael, without treading on any sensitivities, you have been involved in sacking episodes.
I've been sacked, yes.
Oh, yes, occasionally on the wrong end of the sacking, unlike Peter Kyle, as he reminded us. What does this do to this kind of thing do to a party?
Well, I think that it's cumulative. I think that one of the difficulties that the Conservative government came into was the sense that there was a merry-go-round of ministerial appointments, and that contributed to a circus atmosphere attaching to the government of the time. And I think that Don is right, that the person whose sacking will create the biggest difficulties, actually, for Keir Starmer in the future is Angela Rayner, because she has a significant reservoir of support and sympathy within the Labour Party. The other sacking, as you pointed out, is that of Lucy Powell from the Cabinet. Well-liked, thought to be blameless, and now acting as the Arya Stark for the King of the North. She is the assassin.
Game of Thrones reference, everybody.
Game of Thrones reference. So she is Andy Burnham's trained killer, and she will, I think, win the Labour deputy leadership, and that will be another sword hanging over Keir Starmer's future.
I have a feeling she may put that on her leaflets, Michael, but I want to come back to that issue of Andy Burnham and Lucy Powell in a second, but let's just wrap up on this Mandelson episode, because there is now an important vacancy at our embassy in Washington, and that's just days before the President arrives for a state visit, the trip that Peter Mandelson was instrumental in arranging. So, how damaging is his removal for British diplomacy and that crucial relationship with the United States? Well, Lord Darragh was our man in Washington back in 2016, and he joins me now. Good morning, Kim.
Good morning.
I think perhaps we should just start, by the way, of reminding people of your departure from Washington.
That's very kind of you. Yes, I resigned after some confidential letters, communications to Whitehall about the performance of the Trump administration in its first 6 months were leaked by someone.
I can't remember quite how you described Donald Trump, but he didn't take kindly to it.
I think I said he was struggling in his first 6 months to deliver his electoral promises.
All right, look, we've been talking about
slightly more vivid language.
Vivid, I think, is a good diplomatic expression. We've been talking this morning about the issue of who knew what when and so on, and specifically within that, the vetting process. You must have been vetted for the post. Can you imagine how that process might have missed the extent and depth of Lord Mandelson's relationship with Jeremy Epstein, which apparently Number 10 and the FCDO did not know about on Tuesday, but did on Wednesday?
This is going to sound evasive, Trevor, but I must have been vetted several times. You get basically a rolling vetting arrangement if you have a long career as I did. And I have no idea. It's a separate unit in the Cabinet Office that does it, and it's rather closed for obvious reasons. And the process accumulates or includes an interview where they ask you a number of questions. But apart from that, I have no idea what they do or how they do it. But they've been doing this for a long, long time. I'm sure they occasionally miss things, but they do their job.
Well, look, let me put it another way. Let's suppose that there were things in your background, your life, that you didn't particularly want lots of other people to know about. Do you think that those things could be hidden from this vetting process?
Well, I think they certainly don't just ask you to fill in a form, Trevor, saying, telling them what you want them to know and maybe conceding things you don't want them to know. And they ask people about you and they look into your background through sources you may not have nominated as people to act as your referees. So they do a thorough job. I mean, they take weeks and weeks, if not longer, over individuals. Process takes a fair amount of time. So you would expect them to know quite a lot and discover things that maybe weren't advertised. On the other hand, emails from closed or old email addresses have been closed down. I'm not enough of a technical expert on IT to know how you get to that kind of thing. So whether that would have been available to them, I have no idea, I'm afraid.
All right. How serious do you think this affair has been for the relationship with the United States, both because of the destabilising impact of it ahead of this visit, but also because of the loss of this particular individual whose talents nobody seems to doubt?
Well, of course, in Peter Mandelson's time in Washington is 8 months. He presided over what looks, in comparison to most countries' trade deals, a rather good deal for the UK. He seems to have got close to a number of important people in the White House, including the president himself. And there is a technology deal that I think he masterminded that's going to be signed during this state visit. So while the whole Epstein thing, Epstein was a monster, and it is inexplicable that he had this relationship continuing with him after the first conviction. In terms of performing his ambassadorial duties, I mean, that's quite a record for a mere 8 months in office. But don't let's overstate the importance of the ambassador. The key relationships are between the Prime Minister and the President, between the Secretary of State in America and the Foreign Secretary, between the Treasury Secretary and the Chancellor, and so on. And beneath that, there's a whole network of relationships covering the intelligence and defence and security field, not to mention all the cultural stuff, all the trade that goes on. And the ambassador is a cog in this wheel, but there's an embassy of some 500 people behind him. There will be a very experienced and effective DHM. And honestly, if I were sitting in number 10 now, I would say get a new appointment announced as quickly as possible and get someone over there. Because we live, as you know, Trevor, in very volatile times. There's a lot going on. So you do need an ambassador there, but let's not overstate, how much of an impact, how much, the relationship will carry on with a chargé in charge.
Yes. Okay. For the uninitiated DHM deputy head of mission, who is a chap called Jane Frost, who's taken over. Just lastly, Kim, other than the pomp and circumstance and the photographs and family photographs and all of that, what do you think that the government really hopes to get out of this visit? And what are the risks here?
Yeah, well, Trump does is fascinated by the royal family. He himself tells the story of sitting with his Scottish mother, watching the coronation of Queen Elizabeth in 1952. When he came over for the first state visit in 2019, which I was involved in, he brought his whole family, Trevor, which is like saying to them, look, I've made it. I've made it to a state visit to the UK. I've made it to Buckingham Palace. So he will absolutely love the fact that he's, I think, the only American president to have had a second state visit. And he enjoys all the pageantry, and he will revel, I think, in every moment of it. It's not an opportunity. There will be talks with Keir Starmer and no doubt an encounter with the media during those talks. So there'll be some serious business done on the issues of the day, notably Ukraine. But the time he spends with King Charles, Charles is a brilliant, accomplished diplomat. They seem to like one another. They're relatively similar in age. And I'm sure he'll enjoy all of that, and he'll enjoy the banquet, and he'll enjoy all the stuff in Windsor Park. On risks, sorry, go on.
No, I'm afraid we've got to move on, Kim, because someone is waiting to speak to us. But thank you very much for your time this morning. OK, now, the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, had a much better week, though perhaps that's easier when the Labour government continues to punch itself in the face at the moment. Well, she's also made some rather strong allegations that the Prime Minister lied about the Peter Mandelson affair. The Shadow Education Secretary, Laura Trott, joins me now. Good morning, Laura Trott. Before we get on to the issue, the Mandelson question, can I just ask you about the 150,000 people on the demo in London yesterday, organised by Tommy Robinson? What's your reaction to that?
Well, there were obviously some horrendous incidents of violence against police officers, which were completely abhorrent. And I'm glad to see that action will be taken against those people. But there is clearly an issue in this country at the moment about immigration and migration. I think people feel let down by a government who came in and said that they were going to smash the gangs. And what we've seen is an increase in illegal migration. So this is a policy question which it's incumbent on all of us to solve. And we are not seeing the action from this government, which are distracted by scandal after scandal and unable to move, take any policy decisions, move on from just a rudderless Prime Minister.
Thank you. Let's talk about the Mandelson affair. Your leader says on social media that the Prime Minister's lying about, and I'm quoting here, what they knew regarding Mandelson's involvement with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Are you saying that the Prime Minister misled the House of Commons?
Well, there are grave questions about the Prime Minister's judgment. This was a Prime Minister who stood on the steps of Downing Street and said that he was going to restore political integrity. And look where we are now. We've had 2 senior resignations in the space of the number of weeks. We had the outrageous situation this week where the Prime Minister and the Labour Party have defended appointing the best pal of a known convicted paedophile as US ambassador. The Prime Minister's authority is completely shot, and there are questions that he now has to answer, and his chief of staff, because we need to know To your point,
I understand the
Trevor, we need
questions.
to know.
If I may say so, I understand
Yeah.
the questions, and those questions are being asked by our panel here and others. I'm asking you about what your leader says. She specifically says that the Prime Minister is lying. She uses the word lying. Do you agree?
Yes, we need to understand if on Tuesday Peter Mandelson said that there was more to come out about what his relationship was with Epstein. The Prime Minister stood up in the House of Commons on Wednesday and defended his appointment of the best pal of a convicted paedophile to be US ambassador. Now, on what
when you
planet
accuse
is
somebody
the
of
Prime
lying to the
Minister
House of
between
Commons, you
Tuesday...
know that that's quite a serious business, don't you? That is a
So
resigning
we are
issue.
This is why we need transparency. We need to understand what was known and when. There was, according to Laura Kuenssberg this morning, a document from the Cabinet Office which was sent outlining the relationship between Epstein and Peter Mandelson.
Yes, well,
that was
forgive
sent
me,
to the Prime
we knew
Minister.
all of that
What did he
earlier
do
on this
about
week.
it? And
We
then,
knew all of that this week. Either you are saying he lied, which of course should lead you to the conclusion that he should step down, or you are saying there are questions to be asked and answered, in which case your leader should not have accused him of lying before those questions were answered. Which is it?
no, because on the face of it, if you look at the evidence that we have that is in the public domain so far, that is the case. Now, what we need is transparency from the government, because what we know is that Peter Mandelson on Tuesday said further documents were going to come out. We know that Bloomberg approached the Foreign Office, that was part of number 10, with this further cachet of documents.
Forgive me,
so therefore, how
but
could
you're
he
repeating...
possibly not have known?
You're repeating what you've said and what others have said. So, just to be absolutely clear, if you're saying yes, are you calling for the Prime Minister to resign?
We are calling for transparency, because if what we have just outlined is correct, then the Prime Minister did lie, and that is an extremely, extremely serious thing to have happened. There are some grave questions about the Prime Minister's judgment, and that we have a rudderless, a weak Prime Minister whose authority is shot at a time we can least afford it as a country.
OK, there's going to be a new ambassador in Washington. Would you be pleased to see Mr. George Osborne, whose name's been mooted, in that role?
Well, George is good at whatever job he does, but I think that this is a question for further down the line. At the moment, we have a process which has apparently been followed, according to the Prime Minister this week, which has led to the appointment of a best pal of a convicted paedophile being US ambassador. Until we know what went wrong with that process last time, I don't think we can be in a situation of talking about appointing a new one.
All right. This week's big government business will be the visit of the President of the United States. There will no doubt be talks about trade. The President wants us and the EU countries to ramp up sanctions against Russia, to take secondary sanctions against countries that are trading with Russia, which include China and India, probably some European countries as well. Will you support that?
I think we'll have to see what comes forward this week. This is a very important moment for the UK. There are some very important issues which are going on, huge issues facing our country that you've just outlined, which is why it is even more damaging to have a Prime Minister who is completely distracted by what is going on and trying to get himself out of yet another scandal. Right. And remember also, Trevor, that we have a deputy leadership election going on as well, whereby we have a member of the Cabinet who is completely off for 6 weeks as well, who has just admitted this week that her policy is totally driven by the union. So we have these are important issues that you raise, but they are not the ones that the government is focusing on the moment. OK, that's the commentary is for us. Just very, very, very briefly, yes or no, will Mr. Trump be meeting the Conservative Party leader? Sorry, say that again, I didn't hear that. Will he be meeting Kemi Badenoch? I don't know. OK, Laura Trott, thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you. Lovely to speak to you as ever. OK, back to our panel. Michael Gove, Dorothy Byrne and Donald McIntyre. Michael, the Tories are struggling to get a voice into all of these things, and the leader apparently did pretty well on Wednesday. She will no doubt be claiming the credit for what happened
on Thursday. But actually, would there have been much different under Conservative government? I think, actually, if I remember correctly, the front bench said what pretty much everybody else said when Mandelson was appointed.
I think, well, certainly there will have been people who will have recognised, as the Prime Minister did, that he has considerable gifts, as Peter Kyle pointed out, as well as significant risks. But I'm pretty certain that Kemi Badenoch herself was critical of the appointment. I don't believe that she approved of it. I can't remember if there was anything that she said which was approving of it. But from my understanding of Kemi Badenoch, Peter Mandelson is definitely not her cup of tea.
But she had a better week, generally speaking. Is this an opportunity for her to break out of the rather dolorous position that she's been in?
I think it's certainly the case that people who've criticised her in the past will be looking at her with fresh eyes after this week, because her judgment has been vindicated and her prosecution of Keir Starmer was effective. There will be a Conservative Party conference in 3 weeks' time, and that will be an opportunity, I think, for Kemi Badenoch to invite a comparison to be drawn between her and Keir Starmer and also Nigel Farage, and it's the type of occasion which she shines.
Dorothy Byrne, let's just go back to a question which was raised with Peter Kyle and Laura Trott mentioned in passing the deputy leadership contest. I was entertained by Peter Kyle's response on the Andy Burnham question. I remember, my family comes from small country Guyana, and I remember going there a few years back and being greeted by a member of the government who said that they were very proud of what I had been doing in journalism in this country, and it was terrific that I was doing great journalism in London. And he emphasised that in London several times, don't come and do that here. Did we get a hint of, wouldn't it be fantastic for Andy Burnham to stay in Birmingham?
I think he said he should stay in Manchester about 3 times, which made you fear that he was going to get on the train and come to London and be ready to take over. So I think that Andy Burnham is clearly a strong potential candidate if things went really wrong for Starmer. Interestingly, I can see all the issues between the 2 candidates to be Deputy Prime Minister, but I'm not sure that either of their names really mean much to people in Britain at the moment, whereas they did know Angela Rayner. Neither of them are big figures to the British public, and I was reminded of Healy versus Benn. You know, that was enormous, and even people who had nothing to do with Labour were captivated by it. But I'm not sure that either of Lucy Powell or Bridget Phillipson would even be recognised in the street, I'm afraid. So they'll have a big job, whoever wins, to fill Angela Rayner's shoes.
Donna, you know, many of us go back that far and can remember the titanic struggle between these 2 great figures to be deputy leader of the party, Dennis Healy and Tony Benn, in the early 80s, because they represented very different factions. There's not really quite sense of that, but presumably it would be significant if, for example, Lucy Powell won over Bridget Phillipson, who people talk about as the favoured government candidate.
Yes, I think it would be, and I think it would represent a kind of victory for that, you know, self-styled mainstream of the party, which Burnham represents, and I think it will show discontent. After all, you are pitting somebody who, through no fault of her own, actually is not in the cabinet anymore against somebody who is in the cabinet and who may be slightly different politically from Keir Starmer, but will nonetheless be seen to be representing her. So, yeah, I think it will be, I mean, since Keir Starmer clearly wants Bridget Phillipson to win, it will be bad news for him, more bad news, if Lucy Powell does. We'll just have to see. But you're quite right that, I mean, you know, there isn't this sense of a titanic ideological battle between those 2 giants in 1981. And it's, you know, it's not just a function of being very old to think that that was a more exciting contest.
All right. Next, we'll speak to Sarah Brown, fresh from her visit to President Zelensky in Ukraine.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place, and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Well, Donald Trump says he'll put sanctions on Russia and on countries that trade with it, only if other NATO countries do the same. Well, Russia continues to attack and kill civilians in Ukraine as part of its illegal invasion and annexation of parts of the country. Sarah Brown, the chair of the charity Their World, is just back from Ukraine, where she met President Zelensky, and she joins me now. Good morning, Sarah. What was the purpose of the visit to Ukraine?
So I went out to Kyiv to attend and participate in the annual conference that the First Lady hosts for First Ladies and Gentlemen from around the world who are supportive, and was also there for their world, firstly to chair a couple of education sessions with experts there, but also to announce a package of measures from their world specifically for early years. Ukraine are very keen to keep investing in the youngest children, and so we've got a whole package of measures for new kindergartens, flexibility, investing in teachers, investing in learning equipment.
That's interesting. I mean, you would think that given what's going on there, that would be a hard priority to keep in mind. Why is that so important to them?
Well, education is something that I think we acknowledge even when times of great crisis. Keeping that going for children gives them a sense of normality, psychosocial support, and also hope for the future. Early years is really important because it helps frees up communities. That, mothers are able to kind of participate and, go back to work. But also that early investment is so important. And so this is part of a global campaign we've been steering, Act for Early Years, and Ukraine are launching their own investment with their, First Steps Forward campaign, where they want to really be able to invest in early years, both to help the youngest children, because that's so important, but also to be able to help mothers and families be able to just be a bit more flexible with their lives too.
You met Mr. Zelensky. There's an awful lot that's going on, some of which doesn't appear to involve him. What mood was he in?
So he came and spoke at the First Lady's conference, and we were able to meet with him afterwards just to talk about our project work. When he was speaking, he was very much focused on what's happening with Russia. The mood there is very strongly about these direct attacks on Kyiv. That's where we were. People are going around their daily lives, but we're in and out of shelters as sirens go off. Even the conference was disrupted for a time because of that. So in his remarks, he was very focused on what we needed to do about Russia, what he needed to do. He's obviously very focused on the military response as well. So it's that balance between the daily lives of Ukrainians, their investment in the future, combined with what he needs to do as a war leader.
You were there just after the big drone attack a few days ago. How do the Ukrainians react to this? I mean, panic or phlegmatic, or is it just routine now?
I don't think it's routine. I don't think they take any day for granted. I think it puts a very sharp focus on, the quality of life and getting on with life, to know that those risks exist. But it's definitely escalated there. And I would say certainly the people in Kyiv have that sense of what I imagine the Blitz spirit was like in London, where anything can be coming in the night, but you just get on with your life in the day. And we've been part of building a new museum of mathematics. So we went to visit that. There's next to the Science Museum, it's now a brand new maths museum, and they've got, children visiting, but also packaging it up for remote learning and being able to share it with people who can't actually get to that building at the moment. So there's this, strong resilience and this very determined approach to say, keep going, keep building. If it gets knocked down, build it up again.
A new feature that we're seeing again in the last few days is what might be called, I suppose, probing attacks by drones, incursions in Polish airspace and, in the last 48 hours, Romanian airspace. Are people in Ukraine conscious of that?
Very conscious of it, and very conscious, talking to me as a visitor from Britain. There's a huge warmth towards the, support that Britain has given and British people have given to Ukrainian families. But they're very aware that this is Europe and European countries all in it together, and that those attacks in Poland, which was when I was there, Romania hadn't happened at that time, just feels like a shift and a change and quite dangerous for all of us.
I suppose Ukraine, as you say, are looking in our direction. Is there any sense that Zelensky is disappointed with the Western response?
Certainly not when talking to me. I got a lot of warmth about we were talking about the projects we were working on. In terms of the listening to his remarks and the way he was speaking, I mean, he had the new British Foreign Secretary coming to visit, announcing package of measures that will help get them through the winter. They're very aware that, they need to look after people during those kind of quite brutal winter months. So I think all of that is quite a big set of measures. But also the sanctions too are coming in. And I think that's been a very crucial part of what they think might make a difference.
On sanctions, the President has already said that he wants NATO, European countries, to impose sanctions, both obviously more sanctions on Russia, but also secondary sanctions on countries that trade with Russia. Peter Kyle, the business secretary this morning, said that we are open to those conversations. I'm not quite sure what that means, but certainly there's obviously going to be a conversation going on. I take it the Ukrainians would welcome that.
I think they're going to welcome anything that would help advance things. This has been going on a long time. I was last in Ukraine 2 years ago, and you can feel that difference for people where this is still going on. And there isn't yet that hope of what would change things. So I think the focus is on what will stop Russia as much as what will help Ukrainians continue to rebuild. And, you know, my part with Their World as a charity that's there is to look at what that investment is for children and how to keep their lives going. And I feel like that's as much a part of a peace effort as whoever's sitting having the conversations about how to stop the drones coming in.
We always get this, of course, when we have this kind of conversation on TV. People say, how can I help? What does Their World do and what does it need?
Well, Their World, we work with a group of NGOs. We tend to be the ones that can move faster and more nimbly. So we're going to start with new kindergartens, new resources, teacher training. But we know that once that scales up, it will move to the UNICEFs and others to, do things at scale. So we're always open to support, like all charities. But I think also that sense of people responding and supporting the Ukrainian people, knowing who's in your community, knowing, who's out there and how you can help. I think what I found talking to people in Kyiv is that they are aware of that British support and feel a strong sense of solidarity with it.
Sarah Brown, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
Back to our panel, Michael Gove, Dorothy Byrne, Donald McIntyre. The big news of the next week, of course, is going to be the Trump visit, and there'll be lots of observations about the government's body language. And given the politics we've been discussing, I think Keir Starmer's obviously going to have to think about the country's interests, but I suspect he's probably also going to be thinking, how does this look to the party? And there are a lot of people in the Labour Party who are a bit uneasy about the ease and closeness of a relationship with Donald Trump.
I think you're right. And of course, in one way, this is an unfortunate timing from his point of view because it's coming quite close to the party conference. And yes, I think there will be quite a lot of people in the Labour Party who will have cringed, actually, at those television pictures way back of Keir Starmer handing the letter from the Prince of Wales. They will worry a bit about... I mean, you know, they have very, very understandable revulsion from a lot of the things that Trump is doing inside the United States. And some of them will also have a sneaking sympathy, I suspect, with the Liberal Democrat leader, Ed Davey, for staying away from the banquet. So, yes, I think it is difficult. There's this battle between this sort of pragmatic view that you have to get on with the president. And by the way, I thought Kim Darroch was very interesting in your interview with him, saying ambassadors are not everything in these relationships. So there obviously is a pragmatic case for getting on with Trump, but I think he should watch the body language, yeah.
Dorothy,
well, it will be excruciating for him, so they should just maximise the amount of time that he has seen with members of the royal family. And I'm not myself a monarchist, but this is a moment where it's jolly handy, and the more the merrier, really, other than Prince Andrew, of course. And I think King Charles should be the person to be seen with him as much as possible. He can show him his plants, teach him how to talk to broccoli, and it should be as much royal as possible from Keir Starmer's point of view.
Michael, I'm just reeling from the whole conversation with broccoli question, which of course we could make a whole series about. What do you think this visit's going to deliver?
Well, I think that there's a change in how people view Trump now, certainly amongst the political classes. In his first term, he was the hooligan in the White House. No one quite expected that he should have been elected, and his behaviour was more erratic. I'm not suggesting that he's any more palatable to people, particularly on the left now, but he's an established fact, and American politics has shifted. As we may go on to discuss in a moment, perhaps British politics is shifting. Therefore, there will be people within the Labour Party and within the broader establishment who will think this is a fact with which we have to deal. So in that sense, I don't think that Keir Starmer suffers by being seen to be professional and pragmatic with him. So to be fair to Keir Starmer, the last time he was with Donald Trump in Turnberry in Scotland, Donald Trump had his now familiar sideswipe against the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Keir Starmer entered a modulated defence of the Mayor of London as his friend. Both parties had honour satisfied in that sense. So I was critical of Starmer before, but I think this is one area where he has cut some slack. And I think what will happen this week is that we will see details emerge, as Peter Kyle was indicating earlier, of investment in the UK.
If I remember rightly, you actually got up close and personal with Trump. You interviewed him first time.
Yes, not only have I met Trump and interviewed him, I was at the last state banquet which he was given, which was in Buckingham Palace, when Theresa May was Prime Minister, and I had the opportunity to see Trump and indeed Melania on that occasion.
A lot is made of his unpredictability.
Yes.
What is at risk this week?
Well, I think that he will want to ensure that he is not shown any disrespect. I know that sounds as though I'm quoting from Goodfellas, but there is a sense in which he will want to make sure that as the Trump family meets the royal family, that families shall respect one another. And that I think is going to be critical to it. And again, the way in which Buckingham Palace organises these events, the care with which Windsor rather than Buckingham Palace has been chosen, the fact that Parliament won't be in session, all of that is a way of minimising any potential embarrassment.
All right, let's pay some bills and take a break. In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent based here in Bangkok. We've been undercover inside Asia's huge network of scam centres.
This compound is, without a doubt, the worst. It is essentially hell on earth.
We cover a vast, varied and dynamic region that's shaping the rest of the world.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
The Data and Forensics team is a multi-skilled unit dedicated to providing transparency in journalism. We followed a social media trail that led us to Bristol, where a confrontation between protesters erupted into a full-scale riot.
Here it really is pitched battle skirmishes, hurling missiles, throwing punches.
We gather, analyse and visualise data to tell data-driven stories. Sky News has been given exclusive data. Sky News has seen 72,000 posts used in this way. Elon Musk says it is, quote, a viper's nest of radical left Marxists who hate America.
I think we would generally be called far right, sure.
It's called Return to the Land, and they invited me in. Its founder says he is building a fortress for the white race.
I kind of want to ask you, after seeing this, do you think what we're doing is immoral?
I'm Tom Cheshire, Sky's Data and Forensics correspondent.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
OK, nothing to see here. Drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
Because she's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts. Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Back to our panel, Michael Gove, Dorothy Byrne and Don McIntyre. Dorothy, we're talking about President Trump. I suspect that somewhere, somehow, he might mention, given that we have some difficulties on the migration issue, and we saw the march yesterday, that he's managed to reduce crossings at the southern border in the United States by 90%, and he might offer some advice?
I fear he will not be able to resist handing on advice, particularly after that demonstration yesterday, which was Peter Kyle said it didn't disturb him. I think he's wrong. I think it's a very, very significant event, and it's an event which exemplifies big changes happening in this country. If you looked at those people, most of them, or a lot of them, looked to me like they had never been on any demonstrations before. And you could argue, what on earth were they doing there? Tommy Robinson, convicted several times. I think he served 5 prison sentences. He's assaulted the police. He's pleaded guilty to fraud. He's headbutted a man. He's entered the United States illegally on someone else's passport. I mean, this man has a string of offences against him, at least as long as my arm. And yet, people who look like perfectly normal people were there following him. They were there listening to Elon Musk saying they should overthrow Parliament. I don't think that Elon Musk or Tommy Robinson were necessarily speaking for those people. Those people were coming out to speak for themselves and say that they are immensely frustrated by the failure of politics for them.
Michael, I observed it because it passed outside here, and I stood outside there for an hour or so, and then later on went and talked to some of the people, and, you know, the usual thing, lady with her husband looked at me and said, "Are you who I think you are?" And I said, "Depends who you think I am. Not, it's not somebody you met at a wedding, but..." And also a chap stopped to talk to me, and he explained that his mother was English, but his father was Indian, but he was also on this because he's concerned about free speech and about migration. And I think Dorothy's sort of right, that there is... The coalition around this set of issues has broadened from a really sort of rather...
Yes.
Hard right thing.
Yes. The people who were at the front of the demonstration, Tommy Robinson with his criminal record, Katie Hopkins with her incendiary views, and Lawrence Fox, the anti-vax actor, who's also a controversialist, are people whom it is easy to discount in some respect. But what you can't ignore is more than 100,000 people. Like you, I was in the Westminster area for a period yesterday afternoon and talked briefly to some of the people there. They were perfectly nice, perfectly normal people, exactly as you say, of the kind that you might meet at a football match or a concert. And there was not a threatening atmosphere. I mean, it looks, potentially, when you see so many people, flags being waved in a particular way, it might look ominous, and of course I can't look into their heart and know their views. But it would be utterly wrong to dismiss the sense of both disquiet and solidarity that the people on that march felt, and migration was clearly a touch point. There's a broader question, of course. We'd seen earlier in the summer the Raise the Colours movement, which was an apparently spontaneous attempt to see Union flags and St George's crosses flying more broadly. It is clearly the case that on Facebook and social media there are messages being passed and shared amongst communities which have found a reservoir of feeling, which it's not just politicians, but all of us, I think, need better to understand.
This is going to show up in politics, actually. Let me show you something. This is a graph of the current Parliamentary Labour Party, the 399 that matter for this purpose. And what is striking is a number of them who have majorities under 5,000 and actually under 10,000, which are majorities which are quite relatively easily overturned. I mean, there used to be majorities of 20,000 and so on. In fact, you can say the average Labour majority now is 7,700. In the last Parliament, it was something like 12,000. I think the thing done here is that we've got a parliamentary party which is full of people who are a bit nervous, particularly about this, because these people, to be honest, will vote reform.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think one of Labour's problems is this broad but shallow report. Can I just quickly say something on the demonstration? I must say, although I totally accept that these are people with genuine concerns, ordinary people wouldn't dream of being violent against the police and the rest of it, I can't help feeling that if this was a left-wing demonstration, we would be quite as eager to disassociate the majority of people taking part in it, both from some pretty shocking leaders and some very shocking behaviour on the fringes of the demonstration. And I'd also just say, I think on, even on sort of Palestine action, those not in favour of Palestine action, but those against prescribing it, also include some pillars of the community and decent people. And I just want to make that point. But on your Labour point, I completely agree with you. I think the one thing it is worth just remembering that although they're very, very vulnerable to reform, and we know that, and clearly Keir Starmer fears that, they're also vulnerable to those people at the top, on the top line, the Greens and the Lib Dems. And I think that's something that they need also to be very well aware of while they sort of try and out Farage.
Yes, I mean, I think that Don's point is absolutely spot on. So, the week before we had the march, the Solidarity with Palestine march, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a single person on either march who is a Keir Starmer fan and is going to vote Labour at the next election. So Labour is under threat from two flanks, at least from reform voters, or those who are now drawn towards that party, or certainly towards protest on the right, and towards those who are drawn to protest on the left, whether they are attracted by the new charismatic leader of the Greens, Zach Belansky, or whether they will end up supporting either the Liberal Democrats or Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn's new party. So street activism, the energy in British politics, is being manifested in a way which the government can't find comfortable.
Thank you very much, all of you. That's it for this week's show. Don't forget, Deputy Leaders contest starts this week. It's going to be fun. See you next Sunday.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.